My family skipped my wedding but went to my sister's. When I found out why, I exposed them all, and their perfect wedding collapsed. I'm 28 years old. I'm married. I work in an office doing pretty normal accounting stuff. And honestly, I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago with my wedding was literally the last straw of a lifetime of shit. And when I say a lifetime, I mean a full 28 years of being basically invisible to my own parents while my younger sister, Christina, has been treated like she's the second coming of Christ or something. I guess I should start from the beginning so this all makes sense. Because the wedding thing wasn't an isolated event. It was the result of decades of being the daughter who simply didn't matter enough. I grew up in a house where, for as long as I can remember, everything revolved around Christina. She's 2 years younger than me, and from the time she was little, she was one of those girls that people turn to look at on the street. Like, perfect hair, big eyes, that natural beauty thing that some people just have. I, on the other hand, was always kind of ordinary, let's say. Not ugly, but nothing special either. Common brown hair, average height, average weight, literally everything about me is average. And my parents, well, they've always been very conscious of appearances, very worried about what people will say and how things look from the outside. So, when Christina was born and turned out to be this beautiful child, it was like I just stopped existing for them. Don't get me wrong. It's not like they physically abused me or anything dramatic like that. It was more subtle, more insidious. It was in the little things, in the millions of small moments, where it was clear that I wasn't the priority. Like, when I was about 10 and Christina was 8, and I was in a school play. It wasn't the lead role, but it was a part with lines and everything. And my parents showed up 45 minutes late because Christina had decided she wanted to go buy a new dress that same day. Or when I turned 13 and asked for a birthday party, something simple with, my friends and my parents said we didn't have the budget for that, but 3 months later they threw Christina a huge party for her 11th birthday with bounce houses and the whole show. Those things add up. You know? They get into your head and you start to believe that maybe you really aren't that important. Christina, for her part, figured out very quickly that she could get away with anything. She bullied me constantly, nothing physical because she was smarter than that, but she said horrible things to me about my appearance, about how I was never going to get a boyfriend, about how I was boring and unfunny, and if I complained to my parents, they basically told me to stop being so sensitive, that it was just sister stuff, that Christina didn't mean it maliciously. But I could see in her eyes that she did mean it maliciously. She knew perfectly well what she was doing. And the worst part is that as we grew up, she also became successful academically, and then in business. She studied business administration. Now she works at some important company making a ton of money, has an amazing apartment, travels constantly. It's like she won the genetic and personality lottery at the same time, while I just exist in my normal life with my normal job. So I met Nathan about 6 years ago, when I was 22. He's a systems technician, works for a medium-sized company. He's an incredibly good and patient person. At first I didn't tell him much about my family. I mentioned things but didn't go into details. We started dating formally after a few months, and honestly, it was the first time in my life that I felt someone really saw me. You know what I mean? I wasn't the less pretty sister. I wasn't the disappointing daughter. I was just Amanda to him. And that was enough. We dated for 4 years before he proposed. It was super simple, nothing elaborate. We had dinner at home and then he asked me. I said yes, obviously. I was happy. I was finally going to have my own family, one where I did matter. When I told my parents I was getting married, their reaction was like, "Oh, that's nice, congratulations." And then literally 5 minutes later, they were already talking about other things. There was no excitement, no questions about the date or plans, nothing. My mom even said something like, "Well, it was about time you settled down." As if at 26 years old, which was my age when we got engaged, I was already a desperate old maid or something. Nathan noticed how cold the reaction was and asked me if they were always like that with me, and I had to admit that yes, that was basically the story of my life. We decided to have a small engagement party. We invited close friends and family. My parents went, Christina also went, and this is where things started to get weird in a way I didn't understand until later. During the party, I noticed that Christina was kind of absent. She didn't look happy. In fact, she looked kind of upset. I thought maybe she'd had a bad day at work or something. But Nathan told me later, months later, when all the drama was happening, that he had seen my parents in a corner consoling Christina, who was crying. He didn't want to tell me at the time so as not to ruin my day, but basically, Christina was devastated because I was going to get married before her. She, the perfect sister, the pretty and successful sister, couldn't stand that I, the mediocre sister, would get to the altar before her. And my parents, instead of telling her to stop being ridiculous, were there stroking her hair and telling her everything would be okay at my own engagement party. Can you believe it? We started planning the wedding. And we decided to do something simple but nice. We didn't have the money for something extravagant, and honestly, we didn't want that either. We rented a small but nice venue, like for 80 people maximum. I hired a friend who does photography to take the photos. Another friend made the cake. We kept everything very personal and within budget. I sent out the invitations 3 months in advance. I made a complete list of all the guests. And obviously my parents and Christina were on the list. I sent them by certified mail to make sure they arrived. I even kept the receipts because I'm kind of paranoid about those things. The wedding date arrived. It was a spring Saturday, about 9 months ago now. The day was beautiful. Everything went well. Nathan looked handsome. I felt pretty in my dress that wasn't super expensive, but I loved it. Our friends were there. Some aunts and uncles and cousins from my side also came. But my parents didn't show up. Christina didn't either. I kept checking the entrance, thinking that maybe they had been delayed, that they would arrive any moment. Nathan asked me if I wanted to wait for them, but I said no. Let's go ahead. I cried a little in the bathroom before walking to the altar. Not much because I didn't want to ruin my makeup, but I cried. I got married without my parents present, without my mom to help me with the dress, without my dad to walk me down the aisle. My uncle, my mom's brother, offered to walk me down, and I accepted, because the alternative was to walk alone. After the ceremony, after the reception, which was beautiful despite everything, after everyone left, I called my parents. My mom answered and sounded normal, relaxed. I asked her why they hadn't come to my wedding. There was silence on the other end, and then she said, "What wedding?" I told her, "Mom, my wedding. Today. The wedding I told you about months ago, that I formally invited you to." And she, with the most casual voice in the world, said they had never received any invitation. That if they had known it was today, they obviously would have gone, but that I had never given them the specific information. I felt my blood boiling. I told them I had sent them the invitation by certified mail, that I had the delivery receipt. My mom insisted they hadn't received anything. That maybe there had been an error with the mail, that these things happen. My dad took the phone and basically repeated the same thing, that they didn't know anything about any wedding, that how were they supposed to go if they weren't informed. Nathan saw me explode in tears after hanging up. I went to look for the certified mail receipts. I found them. Confirmed that the invitations had been delivered and signed for by someone at their house 3 months earlier. I called them again, told them I had proof of delivery. My mom then changed her story and said, "Oh yes, maybe something did arrive, but they thought it was junk mail, that they hadn't opened it." They were basically gaslighting me in real time. I yelled at them, something I had never done before in my life. I told them they were liars, that they knew perfectly well about my wedding, that they had decided not to go because they didn't care. My dad got angry and told me not to talk to them like that if they hadn't gone, it was because I hadn't been clear enough with the information. I hung up crying. Nathan hugged me and told me it was enough, that I didn't have to keep trying with them. I cut contact after that. I didn't talk to them for weeks. Christina didn't try to contact me either, which didn't surprise me. But then, about 8 months after my wedding, Christina got engaged. Her boyfriend is an executive at some company. He has money, like a lot of money. And obviously my parents went crazy with happiness. They started planning this super extravagant wedding. My cousins told me later that my parents were willing to spend like $50,000 or more on Christina's wedding. $50,000. My entire wedding cost less than $10,000. And we still had to go into debt a little. But for Christina, for the perfect daughter, there was no budget limit. My cousins and aunts and uncles started asking me why my parents hadn't gone to my wedding. I no longer had the energy to lie or protect them, so I told them the truth. I told them that they did receive the invitation, that they had signed the delivery receipt, that they simply decided not to go and then lied to me about it. I told them about Christina crying at my engagement party because I was getting married first, and about how my whole life I had been the invisible daughter while Christina was the star. Some relatives didn't believe me at first, but others said they weren't surprised, that they had noticed the favoritism for years but had never said anything because it wasn't their place. Then something happened that I didn't expect. My cousins, my aunts and uncles, several relatives from my side, decided not to go to Christina's engagement party. And then they announced they wouldn't go to her wedding either. It wasn't something coordinated that I organized. They made their own decisions after hearing my story. Apparently, several of them went to my parents and asked them directly why they hadn't gone to my wedding, and my parents didn't have a good answer. They tried to say it had been a misunderstanding, but when the relatives pressed for details, the story didn't add up. My parents called me furious. My mom was screaming about how dare I sabotage my sister's wedding, that I was spreading lies about them, that I was envious and resentful. My dad said I was a disgrace as a daughter, that after everything they had done for me, this is how I repaid them. I let them talk for a while. I let them get all their fury out, and then, for the first time in my life, I told them everything I had kept bottled up for years. I told them that my whole life they had made me feel like I wasn't enough, that every achievement of mine was minimized while every little thing Christina did was celebrated as if she had cured cancer. I reminded them of my school play, where they arrived late, my 13th birthday, where they said there was no money, but then threw Christina a huge party. I reminded them of every time Christina bullied me, and they told me to stop being sensitive. I told them they had failed me as parents, that their only obligation was to love their daughters equally, and they couldn't even do that. I told them I hadn't sabotaged anything, that I had simply told the truth when family asked. And if that truth made them look bad, it was because they had acted badly. My mom cried and said I was exaggerating, that they had always loved me, that if I felt Christina received more attention, it was because Christina needed more guidance for being more sociable and ambitious. My dad said my feelings were a product of my own insecurity, that if I felt inferior to Christina, it was my problem, not theirs. I told them I wasn't going to keep begging for crumbs of their affection, that I was tired of being the daughter who didn't matter. My dad then said something that basically sealed everything. He said, "If that's how you feel, maybe it's better if you're not part of this family." He said it. He literally told me to get out of the family. I told him perfect, that was exactly what I was going to do, and I hung up. Christina sent me a text message a few days later. It wasn't a message apologizing or asking how I was. It was a message demanding that I apologize to our parents and to her for ruining her wedding. That because of me, her plans were falling apart, that half the family wasn't going to go, that it was my responsibility to fix this. I didn't even respond. Then she called Nathan, my husband, and he told her to leave us alone, that I had nothing to apologize for, that if her wedding was falling apart, it was a consequence of years of mistreatment toward me. Christina yelled at him that I had always been jealous, that I had never been able to stand that she was more successful, prettier, more everything. Nathan hung up on her. My parents tried to do damage control with the rest of the family. They told everyone that I was lying out of jealousy of Christina's bigger wedding, that I was resentful because Nathan and I didn't have as much money as Christina's boyfriend, that basically I was making up stories out of envy. But the thing is that too many people had already seen the pattern for years. My cousins remembered all those moments where I was ignored. And my aunts and uncles remembered how my parents always talked about Christina's achievements, but never mentioned anything of mine. One of my aunts even confronted my mom and told her that she had noticed the favoritism since we were little girls, that it wasn't something new or made up by me. My parents' strategy basically blew up in their faces. Instead of the family seeing me as the jealous liar, more people realized I had been telling the truth. Even some relatives from my dad's side, who initially hadn't believed me, started to change their minds after seeing how my parents reacted so defensively and with so many contradictions in their stories. In the end, Christina's wedding did take place, but it was quite a bit smaller than they had planned because a bunch of people simply didn't go. I know this because a cousin told me I obviously wasn't invited, or well, technically yes, an invitation did arrive, but I threw it in the trash without opening it. It's been about 3 months since Christina's wedding. My parents haven't contacted me, and I haven't contacted them. Christina hasn't either. It's weird. After 28 years of having this dysfunctional family, now I just don't have it. But honestly, I don't feel as bad as I thought I would. Like, of course it hurts. Obviously, it hurts to know that your own parents chose to ignore you on your wedding day, that they chose your sister over you again and again and again throughout your whole life. But there's also something liberating about no longer having to compete for attention I was never going to receive, about no longer having to wonder what I'm doing wrong, to not be enough. Nathan and I are good. Better than good, actually. We just moved to a bigger apartment because we're thinking about having kids soon, and honestly, I'm excited about that. I'm going to be the kind of mother who celebrates her children equally, who goes to all the school plays and all the birthdays, who doesn't compare or put one above the other. I'm going to break this cycle of shit, basically. Some of my cousins and aunts and uncles are still in touch with me. They write to me often. They invite me to things. I have incredible friends who were there at my wedding when my blood family wasn't. I have a husband who sees me and values me every day. Last week, I ran into one of my mom's friends at the supermarket. She asked me how things were. If I had already reconciled with my parents. I told her no, that I didn't plan to. She told me that was sad, that family is the most important thing, that I should forgive. I told her there's a difference between forgiving and allowing yourself to be mistreated, and that I had chosen my peace of mind over maintaining a toxic relationship. She was quiet for a moment and then changed the subject. I don't know if I managed to make her understand my point, but I don't really care that much either. I'm no longer at the stage of my life where I need others to validate my decisions, I guess. Sometimes I wonder if Christina regrets anything. If she ever stopped to think about how she treated me for years. Probably not. People like her, people who have been put on a pedestal their whole lives, don't usually develop that kind of self-criticism. And my parents definitely don't regret anything. They're convinced I did this out of jealousy, that I'm the one who has the problem. And maybe they're right about one thing. Maybe I do have a problem. The problem of having put up with their shit for too long before finally saying enough is enough. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. If someday my parents are going to want to meet my children, if Christina is ever going to try to fix things, honestly, I haven't thought much about it because I'm busy living my life. The life I built with Nathan, the life where I don't have to feel invisible or less than. It's a quieter life, less dramatic, and much happier than it ever was when I was desperately trying to earn the love of people who had already decided to give it all to someone else. And that, honestly, is enough for me.